Hello and welcome to Verico Academy. This program is called The Art of Influence. To begin with, I'd like you to shut your eyes, touch the tip of your nose with your index finger slowly. Focus on your movement. Did you find your nose? Open your eyes. Now do it again with your other hand. Slowly, focus on your movement. Was it more difficult to do it with your non-dominant hand? Research shows that using your non-dominant hand is a little more difficult than using your dominant hand. The reason that I asked you to go through this short exercise was to point out to you something called tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is unwritten, unspoken, and hidden vast storehouse of knowledge held by practically every normal human being based on his or her emotions, experiences, insights, intuition, observations, and internalized information. In other words, it's your unconscious mind doing things that you've learned to do over the years. The conscious mind processes 16 to 40 million bits of information per minute. It's energy intensive and inefficient. However, it is flexible. So you used your conscious mind when you used your non-dominant hand to touch your nose. Your unconscious mind was used when you automatically reached up with your index finger to touch your nose without even thinking. And it processes a minimum of 11 million bits of information per minute. It is very quick, it is very efficient. However, it is somewhat limiting. Today, in this program, what we're going to ask you to do is consciously change the way you do things. In preparation of this program, I looked at several different models of influence. I looked at negotiation, controlling the conversation, and persuasion models, and they all come under the umbrella of the art of influence. The first model I looked at was provided by a psychologist in Arizona State. He believed that there were 6 core principles of social influence. The first one is reciprocity. We feel obligated to return favors. You do for me, I do for you. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Liking. We have a tendency to say yes to people whom we like. Scarcity. That means we place more value on things that are in short supply. So think of things like artwork or special cards. Remember when the Corvette came out, they made only a limited supply of them available to the public. Social proof. We look at what others are doing when we're not sure of what we are to do ourselves. Authority, and this is where you come into play. We listen to experts and those in positions of power. Consumers want to talk to experts when it comes to mortgages, and that's what you are. Commitment and consistency. We like to be true to our word and finish what we've started. The next model we looked at was called Negotiation Level 1. It was offered through the Justice Institute of BC, the Center for Conflict Resolution, and it's one of the programs that is offered in a mediation certification. It included preparation, setting the framework and establishing a collaborative atmosphere, clarifying the issue, exploration and building understanding of interest, and then finally building agreement. And the last model that we looked at, which is one that we're going to be using in this program today, is a book written by Arlene Dickinson, who is known for being on The Dragon's Den. It's her book called Persuasion. In her book, she suggests that the art of influence or persuasion evolves around the following. Principled persuasion, which to her, principled persuasion is authenticity, honesty, and reciprocity. In other words, to persuade with principles or integrity or ethics. In her book, she talks a lot about the preparation that's required in order to be persuasive. She has a chapter called Shh, which means don't talk, don't fill the silence, let somebody else fill it. She has an area devoted to understand, which means understanding what the other person wants and needs and understanding what you have and what you can provide. The pitch, in other words, your sales pitch. Authenticity. To Dickinson, authenticity is about telling the truth to yourself and making your character clear to other people. People will identify with somebody that is open, honest, trying to connect, vulnerable, and insecure. All characteristics of authenticity. Honesty. She describes it as telling the truth to others. In our industry, and in most businesses, sometimes you'll find that the truth tellers don't close the deal. And in our business, they might not close the deal, but they maintain their reputation and they win in the end. Reciprocity. To Dickinson, that means what's in it for them, not just for you. And you'll find throughout this program and throughout her book, she talks about putting the other party first, putting the other party before you. Here's an example of reciprocity. It was New Year's Eve and a mom and dad were having a party. The 7-year-old of the family wanted to stay up late, and he wanted to see the new year in and celebrate with his parents and the rest of the people at the party. And the mom said to him, "You know what happens when you don't go to bed on time. You wake up late, cranky, and irritable." And the son thought about it for a few minutes, and then he said to her, "Well, you don't want me running around early in the morning while you're lying in bed with a headache, do you?" So what the son did was put the needs of the mother before himself. And in so doing, he was able to convince her that it would be a good idea for him to stay up because she wouldn't want him up early and ruining her morning sleep. Prepare. As I mentioned, Dickinson brings up preparation throughout her book. She believes that you need to know the market, know your products, know the competition. She says that you need to anticipate objections and develop potential solutions. In other words, think ahead of time as to what your customer or your referral source will say to object to what you are offering or what you are telling them, and then have enough information so that you can overcome those objections and deliver a potential solution. She also says that you should identify obstacles or trends that may affect the client going forward. And what that means is that if your customer comes to you and talks to you about doing a mortgage sometime soon, and you think there's a possibility of interest rates rising in the next couple of months, she suggests that you're able to think ahead about this and talk to your client about this because it may affect their decision as to whether or not they will go ahead with the mortgage, or at the very least the timing of the mortgage. When you prepare, you need to think about what you yourself want and what you have to offer, and what line of reasoning is most likely to appeal to your customer. You need to be well versed in the pros and cons of the proposal. And why would you do all this preparation? Preparation enables you to speak fluently and confidently. Preparing allows you to give your client your full attention, and during the meeting you're able to look outward, not inward. That's important because you're allowed to continue a flow of conversation with your client, keep them interested in what you're saying, and you don't need to disconnect to look something up or to write something down. Another thing you should do in your preparation is determine how your client receives and processes information. You should know whether they're a vertical thinker or a horizontal thinker, and you should deliver accordingly. A vertical thinker is somebody that thinks and processes with details and timelines and accuracy. A horizontal thinker is somebody that is more big picture, idea, vague type person. So if you are a vertical thinker and you deliver as a vertical thinker to a horizontal thinker, it's going to be too many details and scare away the horizontal thinker. Conversely, if you are talking to a vertical thinker and you describe by the way of a horizontal thinker, your vertical thinker will be at a loss because they'll want details and timelines and accuracy, and you'll not be delivering them to them, and they will think that you are incompetent or not able to meet their needs. So you need to be able to determine what way they think, what way they process information, and you should deliver accordingly. When you prepare, you should know what matters to the other party. As I mentioned, Dickinson is very firm and clear on this. When you deliver, you want to deliver what matters to them over what matters to you. It has to be all about them. And how are you going to know all of this? You're going to listen, observe, and you're going to question. When you listen, you put the other person first. Listening well can be the foundation for an emotional connection. People like to be heard. When you listen, there'll sometimes be silence. There'll sometimes be that pregnant pause. Don't try to fill that silence. Just let it be. And what will happen is the silence will make people reveal more of themselves. And that's how you'll get more information from the person that you're dealing with. Nonverbal communication accounts for 93% of the total communication. So it's important that you do observe. If somebody is sitting up straight, fidgeting, and crossing their arms, what would that indicate about them? It would indicate that they're not into what you're saying, they're not listening, they're not believing what you're saying, you're not connecting with them. If they're leaning towards you, as a point of interest is that they are engaged, they're interested, they like what you're saying, you're getting them, and they're hearing what you have to say. If they're sitting with their head hung and their shoulders slumped, it could be that they're ashamed or they're embarrassed. It could be somebody that has had poor credit or poor income and hasn't been able to qualify for a mortgage, or maybe has just found out that they need to go to a subprime mortgage. This is how they may respond to that. What if they're smiling and nodding? They're into what you're saying, they agree with you, you're getting it, you're getting them, and you're telling them what they want to hear and need to hear. Frowning and pursing lips, they might not be agreeing with you. They might not want to be there. They might not think that what you're saying is true. And yawning, of course, is it's time to go. They're either tired or they're bored with what you're saying. So if you think that they're bored, then you need to change gears. You need to come up with something that will get their attention and get them interested again. If they're tired, then you're probably better off to just ask if you can continue at a later date. When you ask questions, you engage the customer or the referral source. You need to try and figure the person out by asking questions. Find out who they are, what they want, rather than trying to sell them. How do your self-interests align and complement with each other? When we ask questions, we have a tendency to ask the same questions over and over again. It's especially true if you've been doing this for a long time and you have a routine or you have a spiel that you use. The problem with that is that it can get the job done, but it doesn't make the emotional connection that you need to make with your customers today. Those customers are up for grabs, and you are fighting the banks and the other brokers all the time in order to maintain a relationship with your customer. If you make your objective on your meeting with your client to develop an emotional connection, a relationship over getting that mortgage, you will have a customer for a lot longer than if you're just meeting with them to get the mortgage. We need to ask different questions, we need to learn new ones, and you need to use your conscious mind to use these new questions. So we're going to talk about some question types. First off, if you're just trying to establish a relationship and maybe you're running out of things to talk to them about, or maybe you don't see anything in their office or on their person or in their home or their car or wherever you're meeting that you can discuss with them, you can always remember the acronym FORD, F-O-R-D, and use questions relating to family, occupation, recreation, or dreams. There's always something that you can ask of someone in one of these 4 topics in order to get a conversation going and develop a relationship. Another question type are questions that propel a conversation forward, questions that question the question. So here's some examples of those. Somebody says something to you and you respond, "That's really interesting. I'd like to understand that better." Or they tell you something and you say, "Tell me more." Or, "What did you think when?" These questions encourage further conversation about the subject that's been discussed. Subtext. Subtext is you hear what they are not saying. Here's an example. I say to somebody, "How are you?" And they respond, "I'm okay, just tired, never seem to get enough sleep." I can respond by saying, "Oh, me too, I know what you mean," which gets nobody anywhere. That doesn't continue a conversation, that puts an end to the conversation. Or I could say, "You haven't been sleeping? Is everything okay?" Or what you could say is something very basic like, "You haven't been sleeping? What's that all about?" So what that will do is encourage that person to say a little bit more about what's going on in their life or not. And from that, and their response to that, you'll be able to determine if they're a type of person that will reveal, will talk a little bit more, or if there's somebody that you have to watch what you're saying to. Here's some examples of some question types that you would ask a referral source. These are examples of questions that you might not normally ask. First one is, what is most important to you in selecting a mortgage broker for your clients? Another one could be, what can I do to help you get more business? Or, how frequently do you like to connect? These are important questions, and if you don't ask, you're not going to get the answers to them. These are also questions that make the referral source feel important, feel that you really are concerned about their business over your business. Client interview questions. Here's some examples of things that you might not be asking. What is the most important component to you about the loan process? We can't always assume that it's just getting a mortgage for the best rate, and if you ask, they'll tell you. Do you see yourself incurring other financial obligations in the next 6 months? Another good question, because that will help you in deciding what type of mortgage they'll need, or it might help you in understanding the terms of the mortgage that are required or the amortization. Let's say they're going to have some more financial requirements in 6 months' times, maybe a child going to university or to a private school, or maybe they're going to be on maternity leave or something like that. You need to look ahead in order to keep your customer satisfied for the whole term of the mortgage, not just in getting the mortgage. What is your preferred method of communication during this process? Again, important thing to ask. We assume everybody likes email. Some people are sick of email. Some people don't want to get your communication via email. Some people need to have a conversation with somebody, especially during a time that's stressful, like buying a house, getting a mortgage, doing renovations, and a phone call might be more appropriate and comforting to them than an email. Empathic listening. It's also known as active listening or reflective listening. It's key to the emotional connection. It lets the person you're addressing know how you feel and that you are empathic. I understand your problem, how you feel about it. I'm interested in what you're saying, and I am not judging you. So empathy is making them understand that you get it. You understand how they feel. You can put yourself in their place and you don't judge them. Now, that statement might be a bit too flowery for our business. This one might be more appropriate. I understand you, and I'm interested in being a resource to help you resolve this problem. There's 3 steps to empathic listening. The first one is to reflect what the speaker feels. The second is to reflect what the speaker says. And the third is to reflect what the speaker says and feels in your own words. Here's some examples. You feel blank about blank. It could be you feel anxious about the mortgage. You feel confused about the terms of the mortgage. Here's another. As I get it, you feel, and you continue on depending upon what they have said. Or, so as you see it, and carry on. Again, these are expressions of understanding how someone feels and letting them know that you can relate to them, you understand it, you've put yourself in their shoes, and you're not judging them whatever the situation is. When you listen well, you acknowledge the speaker, increase the speaker's self-esteem and confidence, gain the speaker's cooperation, reduce stress and tension, build teamwork, gain trust, elicit openness, gain a sharing of ideas and thoughts, obtain more valid information about the speakers and the subject. All that when you listen well. Here is an example of empathic listening. In World War II, Winston Churchill was going to award the Victoria Cross for bravery to a young man named Sergeant James Ward. He was a bomber airman. He was quite a quiet, shy guy. And what he had done was, while he was in the airplane, an engine fire had started, so on the outside of the plane, and he tied a rope around his waist, climbed out onto the outside of the plane, and put the fire out. And for this, he was going to receive the Victoria Cross for bravery. He was to be awarded this Victoria Cross, and he went to Winston Churchill, and Churchill was trying to have a conversation with him and to put him at ease, but he wasn't able to do so. Not only was Sergeant Ward quiet and shy, but he felt sort of in awe of Churchill, and Churchill realized this after several attempts of a conversation and said to him, "You must feel very humble and awkward in my presence." And the young man said, "Yes, I do." To which Churchill replied, "Well, then you can imagine how humble and awkward I feel in yours." So you see how Churchill did that? And after that, the sergeant was able to have a conversation with him because he was much more relaxed. There are several samples of questions that we've just covered off in this presentation, and what we have done is prepared a PDF of sample questions. It's attached to this site, and these are the 9 categories of questions that we have available to you. I do encourage you to print off that PDF, and with your next meeting with a customer or with a referral source, go through those questions and try to use your conscious mind to ask new questions and get new answers and get more information about your client or your referral source than you have before. Let's talk a little bit about the pitch. Dickinson advises that you don't jump to tactical solutions when you do your pitch. So that means that she's suggesting that you don't just go into the meeting and make your offer, tell the customer what they should do. She says that you should work collaboratively with the client. Go into that meeting with some ideas, but work with the client to come to the conclusion as to what will work best for them. Because when you work collaboratively with a client, it lets both sides own the decision, and that's what you want. Because once your customer owns that decision, they're not going to go to somebody else. They'll have made the decision along with you. They'll feel like they're a part of it and in control of the situation, and they'll stick with you. Also, during the pitch, Dickinson recommends that you focus on the benefits, not the features. For example, a feature could be prepayment options. The benefit that you would emphasize is that it can save you money. So let's say in a conversation with your client, you found out that they have teenage kids that are soon going to be going to university, and they're thinking already about where they're going to get the tuition for these kids. You could use that benefit of saving money when talking to your customer and explain to them the prepayment options. The benefit is that it saves them money, and so after a period of time, using the prepayment options, they'll have saved extra money by way of paying down the mortgage faster, and they'll be able to refinance at that time, take money out and use that for the tuition, or refinance and extend the remaining balance over a longer amortization, have lower payments that allows them greater cash flow during the month. Again, you want to emphasize the benefits, not the feature. She uses Nike as an example and says that Nike doesn't stress how breathable the shoe is or how long the insert will last. They stress that the shoe will make you jump more like Michael Jordan, a benefit of wearing a Nike shoe. During the pitch, Dickinson suggests that you present things in such a way that they appear to be not in your own best interest, but in those of whom you are trying to influence. So again, it's what's in it for them, not for you. Remember the story of the 7-year-old and the New Year's party and how he handled that? Well, here's another example. King Louis XI of France believed in astrology. He had a court seer who predicted the death of a member of the imperial household. This was a problem for the king because it would appear to people that the court seer knew more than the king, and that would be a threat to the king's authority. So he summoned him. And he said to the court seer, "You claim to be able to interpret the heavens and to know the fate of others. So tell me, what fate will befall you and how long do you have to live?" And the court seer thought about this for a couple of minutes, and then he replied, "I shall meet my end just 3 days before your majesty meets his." So as you can see, the seer used perceived self-interest on the king's part as a way to save his own life. When you're doing the pitch, it's a great idea to use two things, incongruity and humor, especially combined. The persuasive power of humor is second to none, and especially so if somebody doesn't see it coming. What it has a tendency to do is to make someone stop and do a double take. This is as a result of an actual functioning in your brain. The amygdala, which is part of your brain and is the emotion center of the brain, is more sensitive to unexpected than to expected. Incongruity gains the attention and lobs a stun grenade into the amygdala. And when that happens, it disables the cognitive functioning, and it compromises for a brief critical time window our neural homeland security. In other words, you let your guard down, and that's when you move in. That's when people are most receptive. That's when they're listening. That's why humor is so great, and it's especially good in the power of persuasion or the art of influence if it is combined with incongruity, if it comes out of nowhere unexpectedly. Here's an example of incongruity at work. A psychologist did a study in 2002 in a restaurant. He divided the diners into 3 groups. In the first group, the waitress took the check to the customer, gave them the check and 1 candy. In the second group, the waitress took the check to the customer and gave them 2 candies. And in the third group, the waitress gave the customer 1 candy with the check, walked away, stopped, thought, turned around, went back, and gave the customer a second candy. And this is what happened as a result of this unexpected event of the waitress turning around and giving the second candy. The tips that were received by the waitress that night from the groups differed. The people that got one candy, they tipped 3.3% higher than those customers that didn't receive any candies at all. Those that got 2 candies at once, 14.1% higher. But those that got 2 candies, one and then one more as an afterthought, they tipped 23% higher than those that didn't get any candies at all. So what happened was the unexpected reframed the situation. It allowed the customers to have a new way of appraising the situation at hand. The third group, the ones that got the candy and then the candy again, thought they were given special treatment, and so they decided to give something back. Incongruity, the unexpected, reframed the situation and resulted in reciprocity. So can you think of something that you could do for your customer or your referral source that would have the same effect? Here's a presentation tip for you when you do the pitch. Don't use jargon and keep it simple. There was a study done in 2008 at the University of Michigan, and they posed a question to a group of students. They asked, would they choose the recipe with print like this or with print like this? They chose the first example because the print was simple and straightforward. The second print was harder to read, was a little fancier or fussier, and even though the recipe was exactly the same for both, they chose the first print. Their impression was that it was more simple. Another presentation tip is use stories. Stories create emotional connection. After you've listened to this program, you might remember 20% of what I've told you. Probably 15% of that 20% will be the stories that I told you, because you can emotionally connect to stories and you'll definitely remember them and a story longer than anything else. You'll remember Winston Churchill's story, the court seer, the 7-year-old story. So in summary, the 3 different areas, or 3 different models, negotiation, controlling the conversation, and persuasion, all end up being under the umbrella of the art of influence. It's important that you consciously change the way you do things if you expect to get different results. And following Dickinson, we suggest that you use principled persuasion. Use authenticity, be yourself, honesty, be true, and reciprocity, what's in it for them, not you. Prepare so that you can focus on the customer, you can speak fluently and confidently, and you can look outward, not inward, and continuously interact with your customer without disconnecting. Questions, ask new ones, and ask more of them. The pitch, always remember, present things in such a way that they appear to be not in your own best interest, but in those of whom you are trying to influence. So give it a try. Try these ideas that you've learned about in this program. Ask different questions. Get more information from your customer. Create the emotional connection that will give you a customer for life. Again, you might not do the mortgage on this deal, on this conversation that you're having, but you'll create a relationship, you'll create an emotional connection, and if you don't get this deal from this customer, then that customer will at least refer other people to you and will be sure and give you the next deal that comes their way. So give it a try, and at the end do an autopsy. And if you fail, or if you don't do as well as you hoped you would do, figure out why and try it again. Thank you for joining us today.